It's that time of month again where we dig into the trends of the car market to see where car prices are trending, how are cars selling, and whether or not right now is the best time to buy a used car. So let's dive in. And let's kick off this data by looking at Manheim and Cox Automotive data for the month of August. Wholesale used vehicle prices increased 0.2% in August from July, and the Manheim Used Vehicle Value Index rose to 212.2, which is still down 7.7% from a year ago. According to Cox Automotive and Manheim data, even though car prices technically did increase in the month of August, the increase probably isn't as bad as you may think. Of course, at this point in time, we don't want to see any increase in price at all, but whenever we look at the averages versus how the month actually performed in August, it actually underperformed. Technically and based on historical prices, the month of August brings an increase in wholesale used vehicle prices by 0.3%, but this August, wholesale used vehicle prices only increased by 0.2%. The difference between that basically doesn't mean anything, but I do think that it is important to note. So prices did go up, but they went up just slightly, and they are pretty on point with historical trends. All around, I think that's a pretty decent thing, though it isn't the best news in the world either. MMR retention was at 99.3% for the month of August, which means that used cars were selling for slightly below their MMR values. Remember that MMR retention is based off of a 100% value. So if a car has an MMR retention of 100%, that means that this car sold for its true MMR value. If it has a value of over 100%, it means it sold above MMR value, and if it's below, it means it sold for a discount. In this case, MMR retention was at 99.3%, so cars were selling for a slight discount, which is good news. The average daily sales conversion rate was at 57.5%, which is pretty normal for this time of year, but is also higher than it's been in the last couple of months. And this is actually a few percentage points lower than what we saw in August of 2019, which was our last normal August before the pandemic. If we look at this data by vehicle type, you can see that total cumulatively, cars have gone down in value by about 7.5%, with compact cars having the largest decline of 13.3% and pickup trucks having the smallest decline of 2.8%. Luxury cars have declined 8.8%, midsize cars 12%, SUVs and crossover vehicles declined 7.5%, and vans have declined 6.1%. But now let's head over to CarGurus Used Vehicle Value Index, and let's take a look at where these cars are trending based off of not only the type of vehicle, but also make and model as well. So here we have the data pulled up for the last year. So from September 8th, 2022 to September 8th, 2023, and looking at the chart, you can see that this is a bit of a roller coaster. You can see that car prices began to decline quite significantly around this time last year. In fact, almost exactly this time last year, where things started to level off at the beginning of this year, and then things started to increase up until a couple of months ago, this summer, whenever we saw declines once again. But if we look at the data over the last, 30 days or so, you can see that prices have started to level off a bit, and they are still technically up from where we were in February of this year. So definitely not the best place that we could be in, but certainly not in the worst either. And you can see that all of these different vehicles, from Ford to the Index, which is like the overall CarGurus market, from Chevy, Jeep, as well as Toyota, they're all seeing very similar trends, but the price points for these vehicles are different, but the trends themselves are almost identical. And if we take a look at body style, you can see that cars are, for the most part, with the exception of the minivan, down for not only the last 30 days, the last 90 days, but also year over year. And all types of body styles are down over the last year. So vans have the highest decline of 11.2%, wagons aren't too far behind with 10.5%, and coupes have seen the slowest decline of 1.97%. Minivans are actually up over the last 30 days, but just slightly. If we scroll down to makes, you can see that the majority of cars have experienced declines in not only the last 30 days, but also 90 days and year over year as well. If we look at makes over the last 30 days, there aren't massive swings in either direction. Most makes and models are seeing declines of anywhere between 0.5% to about 1.5%. And of course, there are a few exceptions here and there, but that is where the majority of the car prices lie. With Tesla, with the Wagoneer, and Genesis seeing some of the highest declines, while Ferrari, Chrysler, Aston Martin, McLaren, and Mercury seeing the highest increases. As for year-to-date data, which is this third column, you can see that there are a number of cars that are in the double digits, but most are in the high single digits. For example, Alfa Romeo has seen a decline of just under 14%, Bentley has declined by just over 10.5%, Fiat just over 16.5%, Tesla 37.1%, which of course we all know is due to the Tesla price cuts that they experienced throughout this year, so not a surprise at all to see that, and the Wagoneer seeing over 17% decrease in value. While some other cars have actually increased in value, for example the Pontiac, the Mercury, Ferrari. So unless you're somebody who's in the market for a Mercury, Pontiac, or Ferrari, it does look as though you can buy a car today cheaper than you would have been able to buy that same car a year ago, which is great news. And in addition to these major swings like Tesla, we see a lot of cars that are decreasing in value anywhere between 2 to 5%. For example, BMW, Cadillac, Chevy, Chrysler, Dodge, and many more. So what this data is showing us is pretty much on par with what we just saw with Manheim at the beginning of this video. Car prices are, for the most part, going down. And even though in the month of August, car prices at a wholesale level technically went up in value, we aren't really seeing these major swings in either direction with car prices at the moment. But you guys know that one of my favorite ways to look at the car market is to actually look and see how cars are selling for. And one of the best ways to do that is to go on third-party car selling websites like Cars.com. With Cars.com, you can actually see how long cars have been listed for and how many price increases or price decreases these cars have experienced, which gives us a great indicator of how hard or easy it is for car sellers to sell their vehicles. So let's head over to Cars.com and let's take a look at that. So here we are at Cars.com. We're looking at cars that have a max price of $40,000 with 50,000 miles or less with a minimum year of 2020. The reason why we do this is to kind of mimic that 3-year-old index that we talked about earlier. And I also want to look at cars that are a great deal, because the reality is if you look at cars on Cars.com, there is a lot of cars that are just extremely overpriced, and I'm not interested in looking or humoring those at all. I only want to look at cars that are considered to be a great deal according to Cars.com. So scrolling through here, you can see that there are a number of really solid cars that are technically considered great deals. We have this Lincoln Continental, which recently experienced a price drop of just over $1,900. This 2022 Toyota Tacoma, which has also seen a price drop, as well as a slew of other vehicles that have experienced a couple of $100 in price drops as well. But let's take a look at this 2020 Chevy Camaro 2SS with 41,000 miles, and it's listed for $35,000. And it recently had a price drop of $1,500 according to Cars.com. This is also advertised as a great deal. And if we scroll down, you can see that this dealership has absolutely had trouble selling this car. It's been listed for 109 days and has experienced $5,000 in price reductions. Originally, this car was listed in May for $40,000. It saw a $1,000 decrease, then a $500, then another $1,000, then two more $500, and then a $1,500 decrease just recently, bringing the price down to $35,000. This is definitely an indicator that this dealership has had trouble selling this car. Now, it could mean that the dealership had originally overpriced this car, which I definitely do think is partially the case, given the fact that this car was originally priced at $40,000, which I think is a bit high. But it is a great sign that there aren't buyers looking to buy that car for $40,000, because back in 2021, this car probably would have sold for that price. Next, we look at this 2022 Subaru Ascent Limited 7-passenger, which is listed for $32,829. It has 22,291 miles, and it's advertised to have recently had a $1,070 price drop. We scroll down here, and this car has even more price drops than originally advertised. It's actually had just over $2,000 worth of price drops, and it's only been listed for about 36 days. Another great sign that this car just simply isn't having the buyer interest that it would have had a couple years ago. A surprising one on this list is this Toyota. Now, I've talked a lot about Toyotas on my channel because in my experience, Toyotas are very hard to come by without a ridiculous price increase or a ridiculous dealer markup. But this 2021 was recently advertised as having a $501 price drop. It's a Toyota Camry hybrid. It's listed for $28,997, and it has just over 17,000 miles. And similar to the Subaru, it has also been listed for 36 days, and it actually has had just over $2,000 of total price reductions, which is a great sign. This car was listed at the beginning of August for just about $31,000. We have a 2022 Kia Seltos EX, which is listed for $23,250. This car has just over 20,000 miles, and it's advertised to have recently had $2,750 in price drops. And you can see here that this car has actually had $2,750 worth of price reductions. It's been listed for 60 days. It was originally listed back in July for $25,999, and it's experienced a few different price reductions over the last couple of months. And last but not least, we can take a look at this 2020 Tesla Model 3 Standard Range. It's listed for $28,998. It has 24,000 miles, and it was recently advertised as having a $1,000 price drop. This is actually a really solid deal for Tesla. I've been keeping an eye out on Tesla prices pretty much all year since they started lowering their prices, and I have found that the bottom for Tesla Model 3s, pretty much regardless of the year or the mileage, is about 30 grand. Finding one that is below 30 grand is significantly more difficult than finding one above 30 grand, and I have found that if you can find that car that's in good condition with good mileage under that $30,000 price point, that's actually a really solid deal. And if you are in the market for a Tesla, I personally wouldn't hesitate paying that price. And you can see here, if we scroll down, this car has experienced $5,000 in total price reductions. It's been listed for 109 days, and it was originally listed back in May for $33,998. So in the case of this Tesla, it's a perfect example of a potential car that you could really negotiate on, because this seller has been wanting to sell their car all summer. They're lowering the price, which means that they are getting more desperate. So you could potentially come in and say, hey, would you be interested in taking 28 or 27,000, or potentially doing 29 out the door? There's a lot of negotiating room for a car like that because it's obvious the sellers just want to sell it. Now, what all of this definitely means is that car prices are absolutely down from where they were a year ago. From a car price standpoint alone, right now is a better time to buy a car than it was this time last year, or even the year before, or even the year before that. Whenever we talk about the last 3 years, right now is the best time we've seen to buy a car since pre-pandemic, which is all in all great news. Now, does this mean it's the best time to buy a car? Truthfully, I think it depends. Whenever we talk about used car prices, there's a lot of different dynamics that we have to take into account outside of just the purchase price of the car. First is, what type of car do you want to buy? This is a topic that I've talked about a lot in my videos. Buying a car like a Toyota is going to be significantly harder than buying a car like a Jeep. So if you're somebody who's dead set on buying a Toyota, probably right now isn't the best time to buy. Whereas if you're somebody who's looking for that Jeep Wrangler, now could be a fine time to buy. Next is the topic of interest rates. Are you wanting to borrow money to purchase that vehicle? And if so, how long is that term going to be? Let's say, for example, you're somebody wanting to buy a $30,000 car, you have an average credit score, so you may be able to get a 7 to 8% interest rate, and you want to do a 72-month term on that loan. Well, if this type of buyer describes you, then right now probably isn't the best time to buy, because that loan is going to be incredibly expensive, and once you pay that car off, you would have paid way above what the car is actually worth. But on the flip side, if you're somebody who's wanting to finance a car and you want to pay that car off as quickly as possible, and you know that you could do that in probably a year or two, then financing probably isn't the worst bet either. Additionally is the time of the year. We are heading into the end of the third quarter, which means the end of September could potentially be a great time to buy and get a solid deal. If you don't want to buy this month, you could wait until the end of the year, which is where you could get an even better deal because of end of year, end of quarter incentives. The car market in general is much more complex today than it was over the last couple of years, because in 2021 or 2022, if you would have asked me, is now the right time to buy a car, I would have said without hesitation, absolutely not. Wait as long as you possibly can. But today, I do think that the car market has changed enough that depending on your situation, it could potentially be a fine time to buy. Is it the best time? Probably not. But is it the worst time? Absolutely not. The truth is, I don't think that the car market is going to crash much more anytime soon unless there is some major event that takes place, which I personally do think will end up happening eventually. I've talked a lot in my videos about how I feel as though the US debt situation is unsustainable. People have spread themselves too thin, and with student loans coming back and needing to be paid upon again, I think this is going to cause a domino effect on the car market as a whole. And I think that this is absolutely the case, but when this is going to affect the car market, well, I just don't know. And because of that, if you are somebody who's wanting to buy a car and you've been patient over the last couple of years, well, then right now isn't a horrible time to buy. But I would wait until closer to the end of the month so that you can get those end of quarter incentives. But remember that if you are somebody who's wanting to buy a car in this market, doing your due diligence is more important than ever, because there are dealerships throughout the entire country that are still preying upon buyers that believe that car prices are still at the same level that they were back in 2021, which just isn't the case. So if you are somebody who's looking to buy a car in the near future, make sure to know exactly what type of car you want. Make sure to find a car that has potentially been sitting on the lot for a few months. That way you can get the best deal possible. And of course, make sure what price you need to pay in order to get a below market value deal, and don't pay a penny over that. But all in all, based off of August data, I will say that the car market is heading in the right direction, though it is heading there quite slowly. Like always, you guys, I hope that you enjoyed this video. If you have any questions, comments, if you have anything to add, I would love to hear it. So make sure to leave a comment down below. And while you guys are at it, make sure to hit the like button, hit that subscribe button, and hit the notification bell. And I will see you guys in the next video.